Good evening, everyone. It's about 6:30. We're going to wait a little bit as people continue to join our virtual town hall. Welcome, everyone who has joined us for this virtual town hall about the bond referendum. I am Marty Hill Parker, and I'm serving as the moderator of tonight's event. I will also speak from my position as the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction for Willingboro Public Schools. Some district leaders and professional advisors will share some important information for voters in advance of the referendum that is on Tuesday, March 11th. Let me introduce them. Ms. Deborah Williams is the president of the Board of Education. Dr. Malcolm Outlaw is the superintendent of schools in Willingboro. Dr. Stephen Lewis is the business administrator for the school district. He handles all of the money matters. Mr. Peter Temperino is our facilities manager, and he oversees the functions of all of the district's buildings. We also have 3 guests who are not part of the district's administration. However, they have been very helpful in developing plans for this referendum. The district's architect, Ron Schwenke, has presented information at several of the Board of Education meetings, and he also has attended the in-person town halls. Mr. Tony Salamini is also here, our bond counsel. He works with Willits, Goldman, and Spitzer as an attorney who specializes in public bond sales. And last but not least, we have Ms. Robbie Akampura, a managing director from Phoenix Advisors. They are the company the district has used for all of the calculations that tell community members like you what they could expect to contribute if voters approve the referendum. Those panelists are going to share a lot of information tonight. We also want to hear your questions. You can send a question through the Q&A function. If you move your cursor to the bottom of your screen, you should see the letters Q and A. Click that icon to submit a question. First, the panelists will present information, then we'll pause for some questions. Next, we'll make sure everyone knows how to vote. And lastly, we'll take more questions up to the ending time of 8:30 p.m. In addition to the questions that people submit tonight, we are going to repeat some questions that were asked at other meetings. Let's start off by giving our attention to Dr. Outlaw, the superintendent of schools.
Thank you, Ms. Parker Hill. The administration and Board of Education have been holding and will continue to hold a series of in-person town halls. This virtual event is an opportunity for people to learn about the referendum without leaving their homes. We are recording this town hall, and the recording will be shared on the special referendum website for anyone who couldn't watch tonight. The Board of Education thanks all of you for being here tonight so the entire Willingboro community can hear about the important vote on Tuesday, March 11th. We truly want every resident to understand why we are making this proposal and how it could lead to a reimagined version of Willingboro Public Schools. Our administrators, our teachers, and other staff members do a terrific job on a day-to-day basis. We do have some challenges in our buildings, and that affects the effectiveness of instruction inside those buildings. Our goal tonight is to help the public learn about the referendum before voting. On behalf of the Board of Education, I thank everyone for taking the time to be part of this virtual town hall meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Outlaw. As we said, we are recording this town hall so that people who can't join tonight will still be able to learn from it. The link for that recording will be posted at the website willingboroschools.org/reimagine. There's a lot on that website, including a quick facts page that breaks down the information into small pieces. The website also includes all the dates and forms necessary for voting. Now that we've laid the groundwork, let's get started with information from people who really know our schools and who are experts in the kind of school improvements that can come from a voter-approved bond referendum. Dr. Lewis, please share how Willingboro Public Schools came to the point of putting a bond proposal on the ballot for a public vote.
Thank you, Ms. Hill Parker. When we look at the advantages of a bond funding, we want to first know what is a referendum. And a referendum allows a district to go out to its voters to take a vote on approving the district to go out to sell bonds to investors. This allows us to have upfront funding for long-term solutions. It allows us to keep the operating budget more focused directly on the academics and instruction. With this referendum, the district will be able to receive $21 million in state financial aid. Please note that Willingboro Township residents already pay into this funding. This allows course correction from a financial standpoint as well. The district can now utilize the bond funding, as we said, for the long-term solutions, but it will allow us to use our general fund specifically for direct instructional impact. Now, how did we get here? We took a little while to get here from spring 2024 when we had to do a roofing review. I think Mr. Temperino is here with us. Mr. Temperino, if you have a chance, can you give us some input on the roofing background for the district?
Sure. Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight as well. Yeah, I started noticing signs of water leaks. And we asked Mr. Swanky's team to come in and do a infrared study. This is basically taking special types of pictures at night. And the red areas that you now see that's labeled Crestwell Stewart and Cotton Intermediate School, all those red areas are the moisture that these pictures picked up. So as you can see, we have serious amount of leaks in these two buildings. Just looking at Cotton, there's over 40 leaks that were 60 leaks that were detected. The problem with this is the water is being held in the multi-layers of the roofing. Eventually, it'll start breaking down all the roofing material, leading into larger problems. Besides the water damage, you can face air quality issues as well.
Thank you, Mr. Temperino and Dr. Lewis. As they stated, the buildings that we work in can create challenges, especially when roofs are leaking and if classes have to be temporarily relocated. Our staff is dedicated to doing their very best every day. I want to share some examples of the way some building improvements can help our staff as we all work together toward academic achievement. Right now, we have done everything that we can in terms of our space for students to provide the services they need. Intervention is targeted and intentional. It takes place in 20 minutes or less. Every minute matters, and distractions take valuable time away from those minutes. Distractions are always inevitable when you're sharing space. Our scores tell us what we need, and so far, intervention has proven to be what works. When we look closely, we can see the students that have demonstrated accelerated learning are the ones who experience intervention and tutoring services. The additional space that will be available with gym annexes will ensure smaller class sizes and would help intervention become more effective. We need to have appropriate spaces for learning to conduct effective academic intervention. Mr. Schwenke is a vice president with Land Associates, an architectural and engineering firm that works with schools all over New Jersey. He can walk us through what structural enhancements Willingboro schools need and how those improvements could be made through the referendum.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for the introduction. I appreciate the opportunity to present before you this evening. So just to take a step back, yes, my name is Ron Schwenke. I'm a licensed architect in the state of New Jersey. I've been fortunate enough to be working in public K-12 school districts throughout the state for the past 23 years of my career, and it's really the prime focus of what my company does. We've been fortunate enough to work alongside the Willingboro Board of Education for multiple years now, and we've undertaken quite a plethora of projects at this time. Unfortunately, like most districts, the need always exceeds the budget. There's far and few between that don't run into this scenario, and that's why a bond referendum is such a need to help a district resolve these deferred capital maintenance items, or simply items that can't be picked off in the regular operating budget. I also want to just note that we take this very seriously in that Dr. Lewis and I have worked hand in hand on a multitude of projects, from security improvements to HVAC improvements to replacing boilers, et cetera, throughout the district. We've done site ADA upgrades and everything in between. Then we went so far as to look at other opportunities and avenues to help the district, and that's where we worked in concert with a company to provide an ESIP, which is an energy savings improvement program project. Those improvements that Mr. Lewis and Mr. Temporino have been working hand in hand on are budget neutral, offset by the energy savings. So we've exhausted the capital budget, we've exhausted the energy savings opportunity, and here we are before the district to speak about the additional needs and to ask the taxpayer for their investment in this district. What you see before you is a gym annex addition that was developed, a rendering by my team for one of 3 sites that we have these planned, this one being the Twin Hills Elementary School. A gym annex at an elementary school, just so everyone understands, is basically take your full-size competition high school gymnasium and chop it in half. It's literally a half-size basketball court. The reason for these additions is currently classroom spaces are being utilized for PE instruction. Obviously, this is not conducive to really understanding what the student athlete is capable of. They can't perform PE as necessary without adequate room and space. And obviously, on a day like today, we don't want to try to take students outside to see what they can accomplish. So we were proposing to have 3 gym annex additions provided at each of the following schools, which is Hawthorne Park, Twin Hills Elementary, and W.R. James Elementary Schools. The first school I would like to talk about before you this evening is the Willingboro High School. As noted previously, we've performed these infrared roof scans to determine the moisture embedded in the layers of the roof system. When you get to commercial buildings, often you find what they call flat roofs. Flat roofs in this instance are a multi-layer system over top of a roof deck. Those roof decks vary in type from a metal roof deck to other compositions like tectum. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, tectum is very absorptive. So it's probably preventing some of the leaks from appearing inside of the building. However, what you're going to find is there's only so much capacity for the roof deck to hold that moisture. And then the interior conditions, including indoor air quality, will become exponentially worse. In addition to looking at a roof repair, and we're calling this a repair because if you see that overhead view with those red spots on this roof, that is one of the least impacted roofs by moisture intrusion right now. So with this option, we're able to replace select areas and then recap the roof to get a 20-year warranted roof for the high school building. Also, in the lower left hand of the screen, corner of the screen, you're going to see an existing picture of a science lab. While this science lab was great and has held and served the district for many, many years, you can see it looks like a 1970s rendition of what was always there. And it is simply time to replace casework, upgrade the interior, improve the space, provide the amenities for today's modern learning environment. So we're proposing to renovate multiple science labs at the high school as well. Memorial Middle School is very similar to the high school in its scope. However, the roof is a little bit further beyond repair and therefore is going to require replacement. With that said, we will completely tear the roof system down to the existing roof deck and we'll start over. Also in the lower left corner are the needed science lab renovations. Much like the image I showed you at the high school, possibly worse with respect to lighting, the science labs are not conducive to today's learning environment and curriculum, so we're proposing to upgrade 3 of these science laboratories. Next, we'll move on to the James A. Cotton Intermediate School. Quite a bit of work has gone on at Cotton. Most recently, we've done an ADA upgrade for accessibility to the site and into the building. And we're also endeavoring to do some interior renovations, curriculum related currently. However, these few projects, including the much needed roof replacement, which was one of the first images Mr. Temporino spoke to, you can see the amount of red and the quantity of the red blotches. It's indicative of a roof which has failed. It's only going to get it progressively worse with time, and it requires a complete roof replacement as previously discussed. That means we tear it down to the roof deck and we start over. Also in the Cotton Intermediate School is a myriad of interior flooring, which is in need of replacement. Some of the flooring is a little 1x1 tile like you see in the image in the lower left-hand corner. Others are materials which were great back in the day, but we've found that they contain materials such as asbestos. And before anything occurs that jeopardizes that material, this is a prime opportunity to remove it from the district to alleviate the building of that material and eliminate any future concerns. From there, we'll move to the Garfield East Early Childhood Development Center. This one, when you look at the aerial image of the roof, you can see the red is primarily around the perimeter of the roof, which we call the coping or roof edge. This one is absolutely capable of being repaired and restored. I just want to note that whether we're replacing the roof or we're repairing and restoring select areas, the intent with these projects will be to get all these roofs back within a complete commercial warranty that will be a 20-year warranted product. In addition, we are looking at a parking lot expansion to solve some much needed expansion and accommodations for staff, as well as a roadway around the perimeter of school. The roadway around the perimeter of the school helps Mr. Temporino and his team as far as maintenance and access to the perimeter of the building. It also provides the added benefit of acting as a fire lane around the building for safety purposes should the need arise. The last thing we're going to endeavor to solve is a much needed upgrade for the district. Currently, the pre-K classrooms are not compliant with the New Jersey Department of Education. When you provide a pre-K classroom for students, you have one of 2 options. You need to provide individual toilet rooms within those spaces, or you need to escort students to gang toilet rooms, which are located centrally within the building. Obviously, young individuals, much like my daughter at 8 years old, require frequent trips to the restroom. That can be a significant burden on parents, teachers, staff, those there in the building that are to help and assist those students back and forth. With 20 little kids in the classroom, it can be a constant need. By adding these toilet room additions within each of the existing pre-K classrooms, we'll bring those classrooms up to the Department of Education standards. We will alleviate the district from filing annually for what they call toilet room waivers. That is the district asking annually for the Department of Education to accept the fact that these classrooms are deficient by today's standards and to ensure they'll permit them to continue to teach in these spaces. We want to eliminate that from the district's needs moving forward. We move on to the J. Cresswell Stewart Early Childhood Development Center. I'm going to start to sound a little bit like a broken record, so I'll get a little faster as I go through my explanations, but here we're looking at a complete roof replacement of this facility. It's this significant moisture intrusion into the layers of roofing beyond the point of repair and restoration. In addition, we also want to solve the same problem we have with the pre-K toilet room waivers, and we want to bring those amenities into those classrooms. It'll enhance curriculum and solve the district's request for an annual waiver from the Department of Education. Now, a little bit of exciting. we have a prime opportunity presented before us to upgrade the district's media centers in multiple facilities. And the reason this is so exciting is when you walk into these spaces currently, they are the libraries of forever that have not been really improved, upgraded with modern amenities, technology, and the flexibility of seating. It sounds very simple, but what we've learned over many years is that students do not have the same learning experience, needs, or modalities, if you would. The learning modalities vary greatly among students, and there's much data on this. And what we need to do to move forward with this district is to provide these spaces which are flexible, accommodating, infused with technology, but don't move past the traditional need for volumes of books. It's a blend of the two which creates the new opportunity. And what you're seeing here is a rendition of one of the media centers being renovated. I believe this was W.R. James we initially studied. And we are proposing these media center renovations at all 3 elementary schools, W.R. James, Twin Hills Elementary, and Hawthorne Park. On to Hawthorne Park. As I mentioned, we are looking at the media center renovation at Hawthorne Park Elementary School, as well as the first location that we're going to cite a gym annex addition. Again, that gym annex addition you're seeing is a half-court competition basketball court to provide the students with the proper athletic spaces for their physical educational curriculum. At Twin Hills Elementary, we're going to be again forced with a roof replacement. That is a complete tear-off to resolve this ongoing issue with the roofing, which Mr. Temporino is fighting. I was there a few weeks ago chasing a leak with him, actually one of my staff members. And when we were up on that roof, it was at this facility. We noticed that the roof looks like it's had Band-Aids year after year. Very common for this roofing. Annual maintenance requirements, you chase leaks, you patch, you move on once you stop and mitigate the issue. However, once you get to the point where you have zebra stripes across the roof from patchwork, there's no more patching that you can cover, and it's time just to tear it off and start over. We're also going to renovate the media center. We're going to bring that technology-infused space. You can see in the left-hand vertical-oriented picture there, that is the current media center. While it provides the needs for the district, it doesn't create the opportunities that it could. And then the last thing we're going to provide at Twin Hills Elementary School is the gym annex addition, much like the prior site. On to W.R. James Elementary School. This was the media center rendition, interior rendering that you'd seen previously. W.R. James, unfortunately, as well, requires a complete roof replacement. It's just significant moisture intrusion over the years. And we also are looking at providing the gym annex addition to solve the current use of a classroom as a physical education space. And lastly, and one of the most exciting projects, and I'm sure will be discussed this evening further by Dr. Lewis, this is an interior rendering of the indoor track and basketball complex. Right now, we are proposing a 6-lane, 200-meter banked track facility. Dr. Lewis will talk a little more about what this means to the area and the level of opportunity this brings not only for Willingboro, but for districts throughout the area. This would provide the full track that you're seeing, as well as the field events in this facility, parking accommodations for patrons and buses arriving at the site with the vision of large competitions being held. It will have bleachers, a large lobby for gathering, barrier-free accessibility throughout, as well as 2 full-sized indoor competition basketball courts, storage, and other incidental needs such as mechanical and electrical spaces. Currently, this has been studied on multiple sites across the district. We've studied this location for what would be ideal from an access, logistics, impact on adjacent residential properties, and the district and Land Associates has elected to present this design located on the Country Club property. It would be located behind the existing Board of Ed offices, and it would not impact the existing public access basketball court or pool adjacent to that building. Dr. Lewis, I'm going to say it this time, but I feel like I'm taking it right out of your mouth. It's the beacon of the borough pride. And I love when you say it because you have such vigor and excitement about this. But what you're seeing here in this image is a color-coded plan of that facility. You'll see on the left-hand side the kind of orange toned basketball courts. The right-hand side is the lime green colored track and field facility. In between the two, where the building steps back, is the main entrance lobby, an entrance into the facility, as well as gang toilet rooms, locker rooms, and necessary mechanical and support spaces. I'm going to allow Dr. Lewis to speak a little more about the opportunity that this creates and the positive impact it could have on the businesses in the area.
Ron, you said it perfectly. You know, I think every time you do this, you get better and better and better. This possible facility will not only pay homage to the story tradition that Willingboro has, but it allows the district, the community, to generate revenue for the future. When we think about how can we be innovative, how can we bring businesses to the town, how can we bring ratables to the town, this venue, which will be built like none other in New Jersey, will be a positive impact on the Willingboro business community and community at large. In addition, the future revenue will be able to now bring available funds that we can use directly for the instructional aspect of the district. When we talk about opportunities and bringing new things to the district, this beacon of borough pride is something that we can leverage and have tremendous pride in. Ms. Hill Parker?
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. And so to recap, everything in question 1 would improve our schools with more space and more appropriate space for instruction. The complex proposed in question 2 is an opportunity to serve the entire community in a different way and to generate future revenue for academic programming. Investments like those come with a cost, and we want to be sure everyone understands how property taxes would pay these costs. Dr. Lewis, can you please explain the cost associated with question 1 and question 2?
Thank you. So all the projects that require work to our existing buildings, just give me 1 second while our PowerPoint joins up. There we go. When we are turning imagination into action, our roofing options, as we know, the dire need that the district has for roofing replacement and repair, the elementary gym annexes, the media center renovations, the science lab renovations to get us to state standard, as well as the flooring replacement and the lane around Garfield East. All of these items are with the total cost of $49.7 million. What is important and what we must highlight with question 1 is the availability of $21 million of state aid. This state aid that, as we stated earlier, is only available through a bond referendum. Now, as taxpayers, New Jersey taxpayers, Willingboro taxpayers, we all pay into this state aid fund. A district is only able to get these funds to help on these projects as part of a bond referendum, that passes. So the local tax share for question 1 will be approximately $14 per month for the life of the bond. For when we look at the home assessed values, the average in Willingboro is approximately $161,000. So for that average home assessed value, it'll be approximately $14 per month. Now, when we look at question 2, for an additional $9 per month, we would be able to include the indoor track and basketball complex, which has a total cost of $18.2 million. Now, I have to note that question 2 is contingent and can only pass if question 1 passes. Question 1 does stand alone and can pass by itself, but if both question 1 and question 2 passes, the local tax share would be approximately $23 per month. And this is extremely important that in addition to question 1, which would be $14 per month, for only $9 in addition to that, you would get both the indoor track and basketball complex for approximately $23 per month. Now, the state aid, as we stated before, is only associated to question 1 and not associated to question 2. Ms. Hill Parker. Oh, I'm sorry, this is me. So when we talk about the assessed value versus your market value, it's important. I know with in today's society, we see houses selling for 400,000, 300,000, 500,000. That is your market value and not your home assessed value. Your assessed values are used to calculate the property tax on your property. A home assessed value is often much lower than its market value. All of our residents can go to njpropertyrecords.com to go learn what your home assessed value by putting your address, looking at public information, and then seeing your assessed value at that point. And that's where we see that the Willingboro average assessment equals approximately $161,000. Again, you can go to willingboroschools.org/reimagine to use the number to calculate your estimated investment.
And Steve, if I could just add on to some of the kind of safeguards that are in place from a legal perspective with the referendum, because people are always concerned, well, what if the projects cost more than the board is proposing? Well, by law, the school district's not allowed to spend a cent more than is authorized by the voters. So that's important to know as a voter, that you're not giving the school district a blank check and not infinite amount of money. You're only authorizing the school district to spend the money that's authorized in these 2 bond questions, assuming they pass, and they're only allowed to spend funds on these 2 projects. Another safeguard that's put into place to safeguard the public's interest is, again, assuming we have a successful referendum, we have to sell the bonds through a competitive process. So the board will be getting the lowest interest rate available at the time to borrow the funds. And that's really important to note because, and that's why the school district is here today educating you about the referendum, is because it's not only about that, the state aid that's available only through this project, but the school district has very limited ways to borrow money. And this is the best avenue to borrow money in order to take advantage of that debt service aid. Again, with interest rates, the board's going to competitively sell their bonds. The investor that's going to buy the bonds will quote an interest rate. And potentially in the future, the board could have an opportunity to refinance that debt, just like you or I could potentially refinance a home mortgage we have if interest rates change in the future. So again, the board has a financial advisor, and I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Akampora, and part of her job will be to not only help with the sale of the bonds, but also to monitor the market going forward to see if it is advantageous for the board to refinance that debt.
Thanks, Tony. My name is Robbie Akampora. I'm with Phoenix Advisors, the school district's financial advisor. And there's a few things I'd like to reiterate here that we've spoken about already. First of all, the opportunity to get this state aid for the state to pay $21 million towards question 1 is phenomenal, really. It's the only way that the district is going to be able to get the state to help with this project at all, is if it's approved by the voters and this debt service aid is available. When we talk about $21 million, have to understand that we're going to sell bonds. We're projecting to sell bonds for 22 years. When we sell the bonds the way that Tony just described via a competitive sale, the interest rate is fixed. And the state then pays the district semi-annually, because the payments are due twice a year. And they're going to pay no matter what the principal and interest is. Kind of an aside from that is that we've projected an interest rate of 4.15% for 22 years. Again, that's going to be fixed. This is a tax exempt rate, so it's a rate that's lower than any of us would be able to get on a mortgage. Mortgage rates are, 6 to 7% today, but these are tax exempt rates, so they're lower. Rates have been fluctuating lately, and we try to be conservative when we project these rates. So we used 4.15%. However, bond sales that we've had in the last week or so have been under 4%. So if we sold the bonds today, it'd be a lower impact than that. We don't like to promise something that we can't deliver on, so we are conservative in these estimates. If the referendum is approved, we would sell the bonds in July this year. The tax impact would start in July of 2026. So when we sell the bonds for July closing, that rate's going to be fixed for the 22 years. As Tony mentioned, if rates drop, we can refinance the bonds, just like you'd refinance a mortgage or a car loan or any other kind of loan. So, we have the opportunity, if rates do drop, to be able to get a better rate in the future. So people hear about rates going up, interest rates going up. We really are still in a very favorable interest rate environment. Again, we projected 4.15%. If we sold the bonds today, we'd be under 4%. So we do have a cushion in there. The other thing I guess I'd like to mention is this assessed value, which people kind of want to say, my house is worth more than 161,000. All of our homes usually are, and a lot of times it's double what the assessed value is. It's never 100% unless the town goes through a reevaluation where they bring everybody up to their real market value. And if they did that, it doesn't mean your taxes are going to go up. It just means the value is going to go up. The tax rate, which is getting into the weeds, would go down. So this impact that we're projecting is real. It's based on the assessed value, the average assessed value. And as Dr. Lewis mentioned, you can go on the district's website to calculate your actual projected tax impact based on the assumptions that we've already described. So again, these are tax exempt bonds. They're sold by a competitive sale. The rate is fixed for 22 years. The day we sell the bonds, everyone knows what the debt service is going to be for the next 22 years. The district has a commitment from the state for that debt service aid. They've already gotten letters from the state saying this is the percentage. The percentage you're getting is 42% of question 1, which is a very good percentage of state aid. And I think that's all of our assumptions that we did to go into the calculations for the tax impact. And I'd be glad to answer any questions as they come up.
Thanks so much, Ms. Ikampora and team. I'm sure there will be other questions for you all later, and we certainly appreciate your time tonight, so thanks again. For the people watching this town hall, here's a reminder about how to ask a question of our panel tonight. You can send a question through the Q&A function. If you move your cursor to the bottom of your screen, you should see the letters Q and A. Click that icon to click to submit a question. I'm going to take some time to read through some questions we received at other events. Question number 1, what is the district doing so we don't get into this situation again? Dr. Lewis, can you answer that for us?
Yes, Ms. Hill Parker, thank you. So currently the district goes through annual maintenance plan where we review all of our buildings to see where the pain points are, and we act accordingly to the necessary upgrades and improvements of those pain points. In addition to that, the district now has a capital and maintenance reserve, which we did not have in the past, and which will continue to fund for specific projects that are of need as we continuously go through the upcoming years. Those funds will be able to be used for any situations that might come up that will help us not get into a situation like this again.
Thank you. Next question here is, what research was done to determine the feasibility of the indoor track and basketball complex to generate revenue for the district? Dr. Lewis, this also sounds like a question for you.
Sounds good. Great question again. Thank you. Now, what we are lucky enough to have is that we have case studies that have already been done. So it's not necessarily reinventing the wheel, but just making the wheel better. So we already know that there's significant opportunities, such as hosting a Special Olympics event, a track meet, hosting cheerleading competitions, hosting AAU tournaments, and as well as other events that will be able to be utilized at that facility. So we are estimating significant revenue from that facility because the available options around are few. So it's a supply and demand. And then what has already been done shows the impact that that facility can make on a community and the revenue that it can generate.
Thanks again. Next question here is, has the state already said yes to the state aid? I think Mr. Schwenke and Mr. Salamini can take this question.
I'd be happy to if Tony doesn't mind.
Yeah, go ahead, Ron.
Yes, we have received what they call the preliminary eligible cost determination letters. Those cost determination letters recognize all the cost estimates which Land Associates prepared and we reviewed with Dr. Lewis before submitting. And then it recognizes each project which is eligible for state aid. I should have noted that we do have projects which are ineligible for state aid. As Dr. Lewis mentioned, state aid applies to question 1. Question 2 is an ask for the entire amount of the cost of that facility. From here, we had no opposition to the preliminary eligible cost determination letters. The state's commitment, therefore, will move forward into what they will furnish as a final eligible cost determination letter, and then the vote.
And if I could just add on to what Ron indicated, the funding for these projects is based on a law that came out in 2000. And the state has fully funded that law for the first 11 years and has subsequently funded at 85% for the last 14 years. So we have a track record of funding history, and that's what your financial advisor has based the projections on.
Thank you both for that. This question, this virtual town hall is very convenient for me and has been very informative. But how are you reaching the people who aren't used to online learning and don't have kids in the school? Dr. Outlaw, I can take this question if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So we've done a number of things that include postcards being sent to every home. We've scheduled 4 in-person town halls, as well as this virtual town hall tonight. And we're sending messages through the township's email list. And that's super important because that goes outside of our school community. This next question here, either Mr. Salamini or Ms. Akampour can take this question. The question is the $21 million in state funding actually federal funds funneled to the state? If so, how are these funds guaranteed or protected if the Federal Department of Education is disbanded? Is the township then responsible to make up any of the difference?
I can kind of add to what Tony and the architect mentioned a little while ago. These funds come from the state of New Jersey. As taxpayers, we're all paying taxes into the state of New Jersey. And this debt service aid is part of the state of New Jersey's budget. It has nothing to do with any federal funds. It's a state program that the state has enacted to help its local school districts with their facilities needs. And as Tony Salamini mentioned, it's been around since 2000. And, districts have taken advantage of it over those years, and it has nothing to do with federal aid.
Thank you.
Yeah, so if the federal Department of Education goes away tomorrow, it will not have any impact on this program.
Thank you for that clarity. Dr. Lewis, I know you've addressed this question below. Why did the district build a stadium at the high school before making these improvements? Can you please explain the strategy for this?
Definitely understand. Thank you. Well, it was twofold. One, there's been significant safety concerns at the previous track and field that brought a lot of attention to the district that we wanted to make sure that we remedied. Along with that, doing individual roofs would not allow the district to get the $21 million in state aid. Doing them individually and not through the bond referendum. Doing the bond referendum allows us to get the additional aid from the state, which will allow us to alleviate the burden on the taxpayers. That's extremely important. When we were looking at all of the projects to be done, that was part of the reason as to why we did those, because we had a significant safety concerns, physical safety concerns, to what we knew that over time the deterioration of the roofs, and where we could actually place things in order. And that's why we're coming to the public now for the bond referendum to do an all-encompassing renovation of those roofs.
If I might just add, Dr. Lewis, one
Please.
aspect to that. For some clarity as far as what's eligible, I mentioned eligible projects. An athletic facility would not be an eligible project for state aid, whether it was outside of the referendum or within the referendum. The reason that is the state is viewing the capital maintenance of the buildings as the essential need to maintain curriculum for the student. Therefore, projects such as roof replacements or envelope restoration fall within eligible projects for state aid. So we've prioritized the projects to be eligible for aid, and Dr. Lewis has budgeted for those that wouldn't receive out of district capital funding.
Thank you. Next question is, if the roof inspections were done in 2024, what about inspections in prior years? Wasn't this damage discovered earlier? It seems like Mr. Temporino or Dr. Lewis would be the best person for that question.
Yeah, doctor, I could take that if you like. Yes, that's a good question. I've been here now 3.5 years. Probably the second day I was here, I found a similar study from 2017. The roofs then were maybe half as bad as they are current time. This was on the district's plan. However, I believe at the time they were trying to find funding. I can't answer to anything that happened, before me, but yeah, we were definitely aware of these roofing conditions. And from 2017 to today, they've probably pretty much doubled in their severity.
Just to piggyback on that, as we have upgraded our long range facilities plan, in which the district lists to the state several items that are in need of repair and over time will need repair. So part of our annual maintenance and review of these facilities is to continuously review our long range facilities plan to see what's the actual needs of the district and to make sure that we are putting the resources to those needs and making sure that one, we continuously have our warranties set, that we continuously handle any minor problems that can be major issues later. Part of the reason, again, when we looked at these items and these roofs, the district has been patching and putting money into making sure that the roofs have been safe and structurally sound and that's what the patches are for. But if you remember when Mr. Schwenke was speaking earlier, he stated that once we got to the point where the roofs looked like zebra stripes, you knew that it was a time to replace. And we know that we are at that point now. We know that these roofs are in disrepair and we need to replace and repair the majority of the roofs within the district.
Dr. Lewis, if you can you tell them about the terms of the manufacturers and contractors warranties for the roofs? If we fix the roofs, that was another question. I think we can combine that.
Definitely. So part of it, when we looked at
That would be great.
Oh, go ahead, Ron.
Because I'm the guy that has the opportunity to do these every day, what we require would be two things. One, the contractor that would replace these roofs would be required to provide a 2-year guarantee for his work. That means anything incidental comes up in the first 2 years, you don't have to go to the manufacturer, you don't have to rely on the roof warranty, that contractor's on the hook. If it's something that's applies. As far as the roof overall warranty, that would be a 20-year warranted roof by the manufacturer. Now, I did notice there was a question regarding, inspections and ensuring this doesn't occur again. With these roof warranties, manufacturers have gotten pretty intelligent in that they want to ensure that proper maintenance is being done. So they actually require the district to perform annual inspections in concert with the manufacturers to observe each and every roof that is under warranty so they can mitigate any issues on the front end and not allow them to exacerbate. So we would cover the contractor's work for 2 years and the roof itself for a total of 20 from the date of replacement.
Thank you. Mr. Swanky, again, there's another set of questions for you. Are the cost of electronics and media equipment to upgrade the libraries to the media centers covered in the bond? And number 2, does this funding include the select collection of books for the new media centers?
I would have to let Dr. Lewis speak on the books. I can tell you that our estimates for the renovation of the media centers do include what we call FF&E, that is furniture, fixtures, and equipment. So when I was showcasing the interior renovation renderings, everything you see there from the casework to the seating to the lighting, etc., would be provided within our budgets. So we do include an FF&E allowance for these projects. Dr. Lewis, maybe you could speak to the books in particular.
Well, I can go on the books, Dr. Lewis. Marty Hill Parker and myself, we would sit down with the media specialist and actually select new books in order to go in there. A lot of times we have great books already, but a lot of times we want to give it a new feel where some of the books may be torn. I know when I'm walking the buildings with Ms. Deborah Williams, she go in and she said, this book was here when I was here. And so we want to make sure that we update with new books and new things that our students are actually reading. That also we look at the tutoring program. Someone asked a question about, does this funding go for tutoring? No, the money that we're asking for will not go to tutoring, but what it will do is free up money that we have in the general budget in order to address tutoring. We just won a grant, I think it was for what, Ms. Marty Hill Parker, $340,000?
Correct.
Am I correct? Okay, so we would then use money from the general budget in order to deal with tutoring. A lot of times we have individuals from the fraternity, sorority, and college students who want to come in and tutor, but because we don't have the space, we can't then invite them in because we have nowhere for them to actually tutor our particular students. We have high school students, and one of the things that they want to get into, and we believe in community service, is to go down there also to the elementary schools and actually tutor them. But because of space, it's hard to do. I'll turn it back over to you, Ms. Parker.
Thank you, Dr. Outlaw. There's also, I think, Dr. Lewis, can you speak to a little bit how the revenue from the indoor track complex could be used to also enhance that effort as well?
Definitely. So what would happen is that the revenue from the indoor track we would, as part of the budgeting process, we are now able to budget that revenue as whether anticipated revenue or miscellaneous. Anything over the anticipated revenue would be miscellaneous revenue that would fall to our fund balance. But any anticipated revenue will be something that the district could budget expenses from. So going forward, as I'll just use a round number of $200,000. If $200,000 of anticipated revenue can now be used as part of the budget for the instructional aspect. So if we needed books or if we needed other items for curriculum and direct instruction, we're able to use that budgeted funds for that.
Thank you for that. There's also an extension to that question. Why does there seem to be more focus on sports and PE than academics and academic enrichment activities? I'm just going to echo Dr. Lewis in stating that passing these questions, question 1 and question 2, would open up more opportunities. We wouldn't have to plan for it just in case as much. Just like if you're in a home and you walk in your house and you have a leak, everything stops. You could have had a vacation planned, you could have had some fancy shoes ready to get, and now everything stops and you have to make sure that you repair the roof. And so moving forward with question 1 and 2 from the voters would help free up that money and help us continue to prioritize academics and enrichment activities. And that includes tutoring for students in the areas of all of our core content areas, but also providing opportunities to support the whole child with social and emotional learning. So thank you.
Ms. Hill Parker, I just wanted to chime in as well. Let's not forget that at the elementary schools, the availability of 2 additional classrooms that currently that the district uses for as a gym, as space for health and physical education, they're now able to utilize the gym annexes, and that will free up the 2 classrooms for instructional needs. That's one-on-one instructional. You would have to use the
Intervention.
terms for me.
Intervention and one-on-one reading support.
Yes, thank you. But having that gym annex allows us to now push back into those instructional spaces for those instructional needs.
If I might just add to that, Dr. Lewis, interestingly enough, typically a gym annex edition would not receive any state aid. For the Willingboro School District, one of the 3 actually did receive aid because the State Department of Education identified that one facility as being over its operational capacity. Therefore, it recognized the need for additional classroom space, and therefore we're receiving some funding towards the cost of the gym annex, which is quite unique.
Thank you. While we still have the district's financial advisor here, we can ask her this next question. Ms. Ekampora, you may have touched on this a little bit, but if the overall project costs come in less than the cost estimates indicated, will the tax impact be reduced accordingly?
What happens is, and I saw a couple other questions, if it's okay for me to answer a couple others that I already did answer too. If the project comes in less than budgeted, after everything's done, the project's done, all the bills are paid off, the money has to go to pay towards the debt service in the next couple of years, however much is left. If 200,000 is left in the next year, the district will raise 200,000 less in taxes and use that money to pay the debt service in the next year. That's by law. So there's really nothing else you can do with the proceeds of the bonds once the project is finished. It has to go back to pay the debt service on those bonds. And I did, glancing through the questions, I saw some questions of stuff that I've already discussed and I'd be happy to talk about again. We're talking about borrowing this money for 22 years, so it's basically the useful life as we have a calculation. These are not, the new gym is new, but the rest is renovation, so we can't go out longer than that. So the term is 22 years. We used an interest rate of 4.15% for those 22 years, and it's important to note that these are tax exempt rates. We're not going to have rates that you or I could get on a mortgage, which are 6 or 7% right now. These are tax exempt municipal bonds that we'll be selling. So the rate we projected at 4.15%. What I mentioned during my presentation is that it would be lower than that if we sold the bonds today, but we try to put a cushion in there so that we are conservative. We won't be selling and closing on the bonds until July of this year, so we do have a little bit of time in advance to project. I think that's all I saw as I was glancing through here, but certainly I'm here to answer any other questions.
Thanks again. Next question here, Mr. Swanky. Can we see a site plan for the indoor track and basketball complex?
Yes, absolutely. To a matter of fact, while it's not in this presentation, we could try to find it and pull it up real quick. There is a site plan included in the Department of Education submission for this, which shows the traffic circulation, parking, etc. for the facility. I also seen there was a question in the notes on this facility regarding a traffic study. When we prepare these submissions to the Department of Education, we have two main requirements. One, we have to very accurately depict the proposed and generate a cost data that is as extremely accurate as possible, including the requirement to account for future inflation. The other aspect is we get enough detail in order to be confident in the budgets, but we don't go too far beyond what we would consider to be kind of a schematic design or a 25% development on the drawings. Obviously, there's two reasons for that. One, it would not be fiscally responsible for the district to pay my team to fully develop these detailed plans and then unfortunately have a referendum which wasn't successful. The second element to that is once we get approval, should this bond referendum be voted on favorably, that's where we get to work developing those detailed, intricate plans that show all those aspects of these developments, including traffic studies, analysis, impacts on the adjacent light to country club, etc. So we've gone as far as we can at this time, and once given the opportunity, then we'll come together with all those other intricacies, and that will be public record. Our documents are public record once the district has them in their hands, and I'm sure they'd be willing to share them.
Thanks again. Dr. Lewis, can you answer this one? Has the district considered approaching sports figures and political offices and companies to invest in the indoor track?
Absolutely. You know, when we talk about the revenue as well, we'll talk about the naming rights of the facility. And we have been reaching out to some of our famous legends, such as Carl Lewis and Lamont Smith, both Olympic gold medalists, and let them know of what's going on in the district. They actually came to the groundbreaking of the outdoor track and are very excited for the opportunity for the indoor track to be present. A lot of this, though, you know, when people are interested, we would have to see the actual referendum would have to pass for a lot of people to actually see the realistic view of it. So part of the process would be going out to these sports companies, these local legends, for entities in Philadelphia, entities in other areas that will possibly invest into and bring revenue into the district and invest and try to go for the naming rights or other, you know, hosting events at the facility. That's where the revenue would come in. We already had talks with the NJSIAA, which is the governing body for the New Jersey track and field and all New Jersey athletics, who are excited to start hosting events at our outdoor facility because that is one of the best in the state. So utilizing that same mindset and bringing those state meets to the indoor facility, which would not only cover the Northeast region, but you're bringing celebrities, you're bringing a lot of entities to the district to celebrate the history and the Willingboro, the beacon of Willingboro pride that will be available to the district and the community. And just, I know, Ms. Hill Parker, there was something I think that somebody asked about the indoor events. Will this facility hold all of the indoor events? And that's a yes. This facility would be there's limited on throwing events indoors to the shot put, So this facility would have all events available at a normal indoor track.
Great, thank you. Next question here, Dr. Outlaw or Dr. Lewis. Will Willingboro residents be required to pay entry fees for events held at the indoor track and basketball complex?
I can take some of that. You can hop in afterwards, Dr. Lewis. Well, that's something that we'll discuss. We actually have been in talk and we'll be working with the township on that. So later on, we'll have discussions on how it would be ran, who would run it, whether it goes out to a management company. So we'll have those discussions. The goal is to make it a community base so everyone is kind of using it, but we haven't got that far into the program until it's actually been passed.
I couldn't have said it any better, Dr. Alva.
Okay, thank you for that. How has the district communicated with residents near the indoor track and basketball complex location? Has the district taken their concerns into consideration? Dr. Outlaw, we're going to direct that question to you.
Yeah, Dr. Lewis and I believe it was Mr. Capehart went around and passed out flyers and invited them to this meeting. We'll also have tons of meetings. Once it's approved, it doesn't mean that everything is locked in. We'll then have a lot of town hall meetings with individuals that will be affected by certain things that have been passed in order to make sure that they're comfortable with this project as well. So this is just an overall town hall, but later on we'll have individual town halls with those particular residents because it will have an effect on them and their quality of where they're actually staying. You wanted to add something, Dr. Lewis, or did I get it?
No.
Super helpful. Let's take a break just to make sure everyone knows how to vote. We will have more time for questions in just a minute. To cast a ballot in this school referendum, you must be a U.S. citizen. You must be registered to vote by the deadline of Tuesday, February 18th. You may already be registered to vote, such as if you voted in the recent presidential election. In that case, you do not need to take an extra step to vote in this school referendum. On our website, you can check to see if you're registered to vote. You can follow a link to register or update your registration, such as if your name or address has changed. Or you can print a paper registration form and send that to the Burlington County Clerk's office. In-person voting takes place on Tuesday, March 11th. Polls will be open from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. Our website shows the poll locations, and it includes a link to a map that shows voting districts. It's also possible to vote by mail in this referendum. Some people have already signed up to have ballots sent to them for every election, and Burlington County will mail those a few weeks before the referendum. If you have not signed up to automatically receive a vote by mail ballot, there is still time to get one. Getting a vote by mail ballot starts with an application form. That form must be received in the county clerk's office by Tuesday, March 4th, if you want a ballot mailed back to you in time. It's important to restate that the application has to be received by March 4th, not postmarked. It has to be in the county office by that date if you want the county to mail a ballot to you. After that deadline for a ballot to be mailed, there are options for driving to the county offices in Mount Holly and handling this entire process in person. You can fill out an application, get a ballot, and turn in the ballot all at once. When you have a vote by mail ballot, there are 3 ways you can submit it so that your opinion counts in this referendum. You can send it back to the county by getting it postmarked by the date of the vote. That's Tuesday, March 11th. You can hand deliver your marked ballot to the county clerk's office. You can drop your mail-in ballot into a specially designated box, such as the one at the Willingboro Township Municipal Complex. One way that you cannot submit your mail-in ballot is by bringing it to an in-person polling place. Those locations cannot accept mail-in ballots. All of the information on the is on the referendum website, and that is willingboroschools.org/reimagine. Now we want to read more of the questions that were submitted through the Q&A feature, and also by people who attended one of our meetings about the referendum. I'll wait for the slide, but anyone can send a question through the Q&A function. If you move your cursor to the bottom of the screen, you should see the letters Q and A. Click that icon to submit a question. For the sake of time, we may combine questions that are similar, and we may streamline some wording so that we can answer as many questions as possible tonight. Dr. Lewis, this question is for you. Why aren't these repairs and renovations being done with the taxes we already pay?
Thank you. So as we know that as part of the budget process, we do budget in maintenance and facility repairs and items of need. Part of the reason that it cannot be done with it's a couple folded questions, because the need of multiple roofs bring us to the point where we're asking for the referendum, which allows us to get the state aid. That's why I want to, I keep reiterating the state aid and the need and what that allows us to receive. Receiving $21 million in state aid allows us to utilize that fund appropriately for these major projects. To do one roof at a time in succession in continuous years, now you're talking about no state aid. You're also talking about increased cost, because the costs do rise, instead of doing it within that 3-year time frame of the 3-phase time frame. So currently, as we know, the district has made several improvements. And I definitely want to shout out Mr. Temporino for all of the work that he's done in progressing and moving the district forward. So we're at a point now that the district needs to go out for the referendum to get this lump sum of projects done in these phases. I will ask Mr. Swanky to jump in regards to the needs of, well, why can't we just do them over time, and why would that increase the expenses and the overall scope of this referendum?
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Happy to add to this. When we develop these budgets, we include what I said was escalation. The escalation we include is for subsequent years because, and this will cover one of the questions currently, we have 5 years to complete this process. Should this vote be acted on favorably and the bond sale go through, we have to complete all the projects we've presented to you this evening in 5 years. With that being said, the roofs are a really unique challenge, not from the escalation factor of postponing these multiple years, but for 2 reasons. One, if we do multiple roofs at a time, we gain the interest of much larger entities and contracting companies which have greater buying power. So their efficiency of cost goes up and the district savings accordingly. The other element to this is the unknown. If these roofs continue and the roof decks reach saturation, which they have in the form of drips, as Mr. Temporino has discussed, that's one aspect to be concerned with. Once they go too far, now you jeopardize the structure of the roof deck. Once you jeopardize the structure of the roof deck, if you're stuck into roof deck repairs or replacements, you then get into all the other incidental aspects that roof deck and structure below is supporting, everything from ceilings, lighting, ductwork, indoor air quality issues. And I'll just say indoor air quality issues because they can be minor to odors, or they can be to the point where facilities cannot be occupied. So if we were to look at these roofs being sequentially done over the next 5 to 10 years, to be honest with you, at this time, I can't tell you how greatly that would increase the budget for each one of these respective roofs. Currently, we allocate approximately 5% annually increase just for inflation. That doesn't account for the unknowns or the other damage that will occur if they go unattended.
Thanks so much for that. This next question, I think you can support as well. These schools are old. The actual structures are old and everything inside is old. At what point do we stop putting money into them and build new schools?
This is a great conversation and one that I have had with every district that I've ever worked in. And there's a couple challenges. One, if we were looking at building new school facilities, the Department of Education invests significantly more funding in restoring and salvaging your existing buildings. What I mean by that is when you see state aid, we receive state aid based on the district's percentage of aid they receive annually for those projects which were eligible. If we were to build new construction, so let me outline this a little bit more detail. If I were to renovate an interior of a facility, gut and rehab your facility, it would cost approximately $300 a square foot. If I submit those projects to the state, they agree, that aid percentage is directly 42%, I believe we're saying, of that $300 a square foot. That amounts to about $126 per square foot in aid you would receive towards those costs. If I were to build new construction, or completely tear down your building, never mind demolition costs and what you do with students over time, because it would take multiple years to build a new facility. The new facility as of today would cost between $600 and $650 per square foot. The state then on the aid percentage does not give you aid on that full cost. They actually give you the aid on $143 per square foot of that number. So immediately right there, the aid is only eligible for a quarter of the district's cost. And if you're only receiving 42% of that quarter, you can quickly see the mathematics here. It would mean a monumental investment from the public taxpayer to try to build new facilities. And it would take significant amount of time and other logistic issues, which add to the cost data.
Thanks again. Could you break down the $23 a month for 22 years, equating to the total cost of the improvements?
I'm not sure what that means. Is it, I know someone did ask 22 years times the total of the annual, which I think comes out to about $5,200. That's what would be for the average taxpayer over the 22 years. I don't know if it was talking about per project, or I don't know if anybody else has a take on that.
Does anybody else want to weigh in there? I believe that's what it was getting at. So thank
Sure.
you.
Yeah, Robbie, you said it exactly how they were looking at it. They were looking at, for both question 1 and 2, is the total of the $23 per month on average. If you multiply that by 12, that would give you your yearly average. And then if you times that by 22, you would get your over that time span of the bond. That's the approximate cost that per
Average homeowner.
average homeowner would cost.
Right.
So, you got it.
Okay. Marty, if you don't mind, could I jump to another question I just saw on here?
Sure, no problem.
Someone asked about the 42% aid, and I'm going to ask Tony Salamini to jump in here because they see the difference on what is written on the ballot question of 57% versus what we're talking about as the state aid of 42%. The difference is because the state total allocation is a higher percentage, and that's required to be put on the ballot. But Tony, I think you mentioned it in your presentation, but could you talk about that?
Sure. So when Mr. Swanky reviewed the process of submitting project applications, the state came back and said that I think it's 57% is the district's aid percentage of what they're eligible to receive for aid. And that is what is on the ballot question, because that's what's on the approval letters from the DOE. Since 2011, the DOE has given 85% of that allocation to school districts. So that's why the school district has asked Robbie A. Campora to do her analysis based on 42%, which is the 85% of the 57%, to show you what you actually are going to get based on what the state has been funding over the last 14-ish years. So that's why it's the school district wanting to provide you with a conservative estimate based on what's been appropriated over the last 14 years, not what the approval letter says.
Tony, can you also answer, I think it was a great question here. Can some of the revenue received from the track and field be used to pay back the borrowed money, whereby it can also offload some of the debt placed on the taxpayers for those projects?
Great. Yeah, sure, Dr. Outlaw. So as Dr. Lewis indicated previously, some of that revenue will come in as miscellaneous revenue. And then the Board of Education has the ability to take that miscellaneous revenue, transfer it to its capital reserve fund, and then potentially use that to offset some of the debt expense to the taxpayers. So that is an opportunity that the board will have to take that revenue and potentially use it to offset some of the costs of the borrowing in the future.
I saw another part to that question, a little bit different, but it's that same question if I could go on. They asked what the bond rating is for the school district. Excuse me, and the district is rated by Standard & Poor's, and their rating is A+. We actually had a rating last June when the district did the energy savings project that was mentioned earlier, and the district rating at that time was a single A. In December, Standard & Poor's asked to look at the school district again, and they upgraded the district to an A+. So, that was a good upgrade in just 6 months, where they got to see the financials for I guess the previous year, and then they were able to upgrade. If if the referendum is successful, we'll be going back to Standard & Poor's for another rating review. Before we sell bonds, we have to go to them to get these bonds rated. So our assumption is that it would still be A+. I don't have any reason to believe it's going to be any lower than that, but in fact, I think it could be higher, and I think in the next couple of years it probably will be. A lot of this is based on the surplus and the financials of the district, and they've been very stable over the last 5 years, particularly 3 years, and that's what the rating agencies look at. So it did go from A to A+, from June to December last year. And when we sell the bonds again, they will be rated again, and it's from Standard & Poor's.
And if I can just add something to a prior question that I think Dr. Lewis answered perfectly about why can't these projects be funded through the current expense and the taxes currently raised? And Dr. Lewis correctly pointed out the debt service aid and all those aspects. I just want the public to understand too, this is not a unique situation to Willingboro. There's been 40, 50, 60 referenda throughout the state in the last 2 years. I know there's probably 10 to 15 referendum in March in addition to the Willingboro. So this is a situation throughout the state where school districts just cannot, within their general fund, fix their facilities needs. School districts throughout the state have to do exactly what you're doing here, asking the taxpayers to address these long-term facilities needs. So I think just to put everyone kind of at ease, it's not a Willingboro issue. This is a global state issue where everyone needs to do the same thing and everyone's trying to take advantage of that state aid. So this is a really good opportunity for you guys to also take advantage of that state aid because other communities are taking advantage of that available money.
Thank you so much. Dr. Outlaw, can you answer this one? What is the district's plan if the referendum is voted down?
Thank you, Marty Parker. Well, we would then have to fix one roof a year. So that will then extend the cost, as Mr. Swinky said. Right. So what will happen is, while we fix that one roof, let's use the high school as an example. So we'll fix the high school roof, let's say next year. So then the other roof, let's say in year 8, is Twin Hills. So by the time we get to Twin Hills in 7 years, the whole roof structure and the electricity in that particular roof, it will actually cost you more. So if we do a simple math problem, we say each roof costs $4 million, and we say that it's 8 schools, that's $32 million, right? Well, that's no state aid attached to that. So it's going to actually cost the taxpayers $32 million. But if we offset it, it's actually a little less than that. So by prolonging it, we're going to end up paying more in the long run. Let me give you an example about the boiler. Here at Country Club, we had to do a replacement boiler. So what we had to do was we had to buy a replacement boiler first, and then we had to buy a new boiler. So the replacement boiler was $250,000 just to borrow it to heat Country Club, and then we had to buy a new boiler for $250,000. Whereas if we would have purchased these in a timely manner, we could have then saved $250,000 and went and purchased 2 boilers for 2 of our schools. So a lot of things, we look at it as savings and prolonging it, but it's actually creating a higher cost.
Thanks so much. Mr. Salamini, can you answer this question once more? Because we don't know what's going to happen in Washington, D.C., shouldn't we wait until decisions are made regarding the U.S. Department of Education?
Sure. Thanks, Ms. Parker. This is a state program. The aid you're getting is from the state of New Jersey, from your taxpayers. It's not related to the federal Department of Education. So if tomorrow, if the administration decides to close the doors of the federal Department of Education, it should have no impact on the state debt service aid you're receiving.
Super important. Thanks so much for that. There's another question here. Will a recording of tonight's virtual town hall be available? The answer to that is yes. A recording of tonight's event will be on the referendum website. Again, that site is willingboro.org/reimagine. That website has a lot of information already, including some of the images we have shown tonight that really demonstrate how Willingboro schools could be reimagined. There's a whole webpage of quick facts that break down all the information into smaller pieces. And as we discussed, there's a link people can use to research their home's assessed value and calculate how the 2 proposals would affect their household. Here's another question for our financial advisor, Ms. Akampora. Are businesses in Willingboro contributing to the bond referendum/improvement projects?
Any taxpayer or tax entity that pays taxes in Willingboro will be paying for it. We base these on the average home value, but businesses pay commercial tax, they pay real estate taxes just like the homes do. So they will be contributing based on their tax bills.
Thank you. Mr. Swanky and Mr. Timperino, here's a question for both of you. Is there any thought given to replacing all school roofs for the roofs that don't require full replacement at this time?
Mr. Swanky, would you like me to go first?
Please.
Yeah, I think what we're trying to do is when we say a total roof replacement, and a repair, it's important to know that the top layer, on both projects are going to be completely new. So when we say a repair, we can go into the affected areas and basically turn it into like new. When we say that we're going to completely tear off a roof, that's because the cost to repair it, to turn it back to new, would outweigh the cost of just starting over and taking it down to its base layer. It's kind of like, an older car. Is it worth rebuilding the whole engine when you only need a couple spark plugs? It's similar in scope to that.
You said it very well, Mr. Temporino. I just want to add, because I do believe there was a question regarding the potential consideration for solar on these roofs once these roofs are replaced. And I want to note that actually solar was a study done during the planning of the ESIP project, the Energy Savings Improvement Project. Currently, the solar could not be completed due to the exorbitant cost of restoring these roofs and the inability to place solar on roofs in these conditions. That is still an ongoing conversation at the district level with Dr. Lewis and the contracting entity that completed the ESIP project. The other element to this is once we replace these roofs, there's not a guarantee that we can immediately add solar. And the reason for that is the infrastructure in your town. We have contacted the electric utility. We've explored what that would mean should we add solar to these building roofs. And currently we're running into limited capacity in the system to add solar to the roofs, irregardless of the roof condition. But that is something that obviously the state continues to look at with all the electrification of the state entities. So I just want to be clear that it is a constant consideration and still a future discussion by the district.
Okay, so next question here, Mr. Schwenke, you can answer also. Are there any possibilities to expand parking at Hawthorne Elementary School? Dr. Lewis or Mr. Swanky, was that considered? And can you shed any light for us on this?
We actually did consider that. Every time I have done this, what we were asked to do is we step back and take the large, broad brushstroke looking at the district's needs. I can tell you from my experience, I have never come away with a list of district needs that was completely able to be taken away by a referendum. In this instance, Dr. Lewis and I reviewed a myriad of projects. Those projects accounted to, I believe, a total budget number north of $170 million. Once you receive that, then it gets the district administration, the educators, curriculum consideration. We look very hard at the essential need to cut. Unfortunately, there are borrowing limits by districts. You do have a bonding capacity limit. So there was actually consideration for that site for an expansion of the parking, but unfortunately it was not included in the final scope of work.
Ms. Enkampora, here's another question for you. What is the timeline for selling the bonds and going out to bid?
We are planning to sell the bonds, excuse me, to close on the bond issue in July of 2026. And that really has to do with being able to get that state aid in the budget. The district's working on their budget right now. So if the referendum's approved, the plan is to sell the bonds in July of 26. The first payment is going to be in July of 27 for the district's 27-28 fiscal year. So once the referendum is approved, the architects get to start designing projects, and I can't really speak to when the plan is for actually all the construction. That may be another question on here, but there's a number of things that have to be done once the referendum is approved, and the plan is to have the funds to the district around the first or second week of July 2026.
Thanks so much. The next question here, some of the current science labs are not in line with the New Jersey state standards where inquiry and hands-on instruction are part of everyday instruction. Why were science labs chosen and how will they be used in line with state standards? As the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, I can answer that one. And so when we think about what skills are important for students as they enter into their next phase of college and career, we often think about reading and math being the most important. What we know about 21st century learning tells us that science is also just as important and helps to give students that competitive edge. It strengthens that muscle of critical thinking and problem solving. And so here we always, as a team, make decisions based on data. and student needs and trends and best instructional practices. And so right now our data tells us that we need to invest more into the area of science. And when we look at our current facilities and we look at what current standards, next generation state standards are asking, it's a paradigm shift. And so whereas our older science classrooms and older standards call for teachers to be in control most of the time and for students to learn or try the experiment out after the teacher has controlled the experiment and gone through the questions. The new standards call for students to engage immediately in the building or the questioning phase and in the experiment. And so they are the ones that from the inception are asking the questions or making hypotheses. And through that work, they are then solving or coming up with new phenomena. And that happens for every lesson, each and every time. And so if we don't update our facilities, we know that we're falling short with providing students with the educational experience that their peers in local towns already have. And so we want that for our students. And as a former graduate, I think our students deserve it. I would want that for my child if I had any, and I'm hoping that we all want that for our students here in Willingboro. Our next question here is, if the referendum doesn't pass, how much will it cost to make all of the improvements if the district does it on a piecemeal basis compared to passing the bond and getting the state aid? I think some of that question was answered, but I'm going to pose that to Dr. Lewis and Mr. Swanky.
I'll start off, and then I'll throw it over to you, Mr. Swanky. As Mr. Swanky said, when we started this process, we were looking at approximately $177 million worth of improvements that the district needs. And that is actually built into our long range facilities plan. Now that plan is kind of our guide over the next several years, and and then some, just to say, well, what can we do and how do we build towards these aspects? Now, if we were to piecemeal it, you're talking now with no state aid that $21 million will go away because you're not doing it through the bond referendum. You're now taking that additional cost that at one way or another, it's still going to be a burden on our taxpayers, by whether it's shifting those instructional aspects to try to maintain or fix those facility needs, or with the increasing of taxes at some point. So, Mr. Swanky?
Dr. Lewis, you're spot on. And with each year, the cost exacerbates, and the incidental issues that develop related to these problems, especially in particular roofs. Just there's no way I could tell you exactly what it would look like if we were to prolong this process of replacing and doing these projects. Unfortunately, I would love to tell you a specific number. That's not the case. I do want to just take the moment to kind of handle one other question related to this. I mentioned earlier regarding the 5-year timeline to complete these projects. What I meant by that was all projects which are in the referendum, if it is approved. That is everything from the indoor track, should it be voted on favorably, to the roofs, the gym annexes, and everything in between. We have a maximum timeline to see all these projects to completion.
Okay, Mr. Swanky, I'm coming to you again. We have 2 questions that are similar. First one, any thoughts on installing solar panels on these roofs after repairs or replacements? And was any thought given to adding art, computer, and music rooms in addition to the gym annexes?
The first one regarding solar, I did touch on. That is a constant conversation at the district level currently. 2 elements are precluding that from occurring, one being the condition of the roofs. A solar company would not place solar panels on these roofs in the current condition. They require a roof with a minimum of a 15-year warranty in place. So once these roofs are completed, they would be capable, provided that the infrastructure can support it. Currently, the electrical infrastructure running through your town has limited capacity for solar, especially at the scale you're afforded when you cover a large facility with solar panels. As far as the other curriculum aspects, I can say we exhausted numerous avenues of what was needed by the district. And unfortunately, like I mentioned earlier, and Dr. Lewis just touched on again, we had to whittle it back to what the district could afford to borrow and their bonding capacity. So while there was a myriad of educational spaces and other opportunities, we kind of whittled back to the core fundamentals, and it was mentioned very well by you, Ms. Parker. And I always like to relate it to, you know, if you get home one evening and you sit down on your couch, and the minute you go to relax, a drip hits your lap or your forehead. It's a small incidental leak in your roof. Maybe you've lost the shingle. That one drip takes over my world. I don't know about anybody else, but it is the most paramount issue in my life at that moment until I get that resolved. This instance, we are talking thousands of drips that can occur in these buildings. And it's not only a problem with the interior environment, but it's also very expensive for Mr. Temporino and his team to constantly address band-aiding the issue versus resolving it at the fundamental level, which is a roof replacement.
Thank you again.
Very welcome.
There are a few questions about the finances of this referendum. So we're going to group these together and ask anyone on the panel here to jump in. The first one is the 49 million only for question 1, and how much is allocated to question 1 alone?
I guess I'll jump in. Question 1 is a total of $49.7 million, and that is also encompasses the roofing, the elementary school gym annexes, the flooring replacements, the media center, the science lab renovations. That is what encompasses also that $21 million in state aid.
The next is what percentage of current taxes are budgeted for maintenance, and what kind of work has that gone to? Excuse me.
Well, when it comes to the budget, we have to follow the state guidelines that we have to budget a certain amount per square footage of the building. And the state reviews that through our annual maintenance plan. But in regards to the items, I will lean on Mr. Temporino to kind of talk about some of the great things that his team has worked on and done within the district.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Yeah, well, first and foremost, as far as the roofs go, I don't want anyone in this meeting tonight to think that we gave up and you know, we weren't looking to fix things. I think it's important everyone understands a roof has a useful service life. A roof is not meant to last 50, 60, 70 years or more. These roofs have been replaced in the past. It's just gotten to the point now that the costs to repair them on a yearly basis is, you know, outweighing the cost to have them completely rehabbed. I like to think of it as, you know, you're getting, you know, a 40% off sale right now. 40% of these roofs are being done, I like to say, if I'm allowed, for free. But moving forward in the past three and a half years, we've done HVAC upgrades in all 3 gyms, high school gym, Memorial, Cotton gyms. I did brand new flooring in the high school gym. I renovated the floors in Memorial and Cotton gyms. Importantly, than that was security of vestibules at Garfield East and Twin Hills. We also installed automatic car key access locks in the ECDCs. That project recently ended last week. I did a walkthrough. What that enables is myself and our security team completely eliminated the use of physical keys to all these doors. So if you lose a card key, you give us a call, we could turn them off. If you lose a key, that key's floating around for as long as metal lasts, which is almost forever when it's not rusting away. We've done minor painting projects in the high school cafeteria. Someone mentioned music rooms. We did change all the carpets in the cotton music choir rooms as well as the high school room. The library over at the high school, again, brand new carpeting throughout. We've added furniture throughout the district. I think with the exception of this budget cycle, the past two, I might be a little off on the number, well over $200,000 worth of furniture. Due to perceived safety needs with the breakdown of the high school track, we went ahead and we actually replaced that. I think everyone has seen the brand new football field. Again, that was due to upcoming safety issues that we felt it was important to address. The ESIP project, that's one that I'm very proud of. I believe in the environment. I believe in saving energy whenever you can. The benefit of this is every project goes towards saving the district on its energy costs. The savings covers the cost of the yearly note to pay for these projects. Projects as simple as changing all the outdated light bulbs into energy efficient LED light bulbs. You take a compact fluorescent, 36 watts. Now we're down to LED bulbs that are down, I believe, 6 to 9 watts on average. We're introducing a power supply unit over at the high school that actually generates power back into, it turns generated power, into heat. And the heat gets piped into the already freestanding heating system. The list goes on. I could probably spend the next hour just going over all the little details. But like I said,
You don't mind if I hop in? We did the esports. We're building an esports room.
Right.
Film room. That's almost done. We have CTE room, electricals. I think you talked about the playgrounds. Did you talk about the security? The print shop room is about what, 90% done, Mr. Timberino?
Yes.
We'll have that grand opening coming soon. I think the painting of the JAG room.
Yep.
We had new audio and visual equipment in auditoriums in all of our schools. We have a remodeled parent center here at Country Club as well. You have anything else, Mr. Timberino?
No, that kind of covers, all the highlights. We are in talks with Mr. Swanky's team. We cut a purchase order yesterday or today. We're looking into building a welding lab to add to the CTE programs. That welding lab will give a high school graduate from this program the actual license to obtain a job in the welding field.
If I could, Mr. Temperino, just a couple other little things that we're doing for you right now. We're doing the entrance canopy column repairs to the deteriorated conditions at the Cotton Intermediate School because we found a safety issue there. And I've also helped the district do 3 ADA and site upgrade projects at W.R. James Memorial and most recently James Cotton. And then I think the one other one that's worth noting is the one we're currently working on to put out the bid, which is the alterations at James Cotton to provide the new athletic space and recording studio, which I think is another great project we're currently performing for the district.
Yes, thank you both. Honestly, I tend to, the list is longer than what my memory is. Thank you.
So we have a few more questions here, and we're getting close to our time. But this next one, Dr. Lewis or Mr. Schwenke, would this entire amount of the tax increase go directly to fund these improvements?
Yes. The amount cannot go to anything else. What the voters are voting on is what the funds must go to. The district is not allowed to utilize those funds for any other projects or any other items that we could deem. The funding has to go to these projects only. Mr. Swanky, anything else?
You're absolutely correct. And as Ms. Ekampora stated earlier, should my estimates be conservative and we come in under budget, even the excess cannot be utilized for any other projects. It has to be utilized towards the cost of the bond.
Next question here, Ms. Akampour, I think you can answer. Some residents are concerned because property reassessments might happen. We have a fair amount of retirees who would be adversely affected by reassessment and bond referendum at the same time. Can you shed some light on that?
Sure. I think a lot of people get afraid when they talk about reassessments because their assessed value is going to increase. But really, you're just spreading around the tax levy. It's the same. We still need $100,000, for example, and it's going to be spread out amongst the taxpayers in the town. If the tax rate, as I kind of get into the weeds, as I mentioned before, when things are reassessed, it's going to make your value go up to market value. So if your home was assessed at 100,000, but it's really worth 200,000, your assessment's going to go up to 200,000, but you're not necessarily going to pay more taxes. Everyone's assessment goes up, and the taxes are just spread amongst all of the taxpayers. The senior tax freeze is a little bit different, and I think I'd let Tony Salamini talk about that. But there is a tax freeze for seniors that they can qualify financially, and I think you may have to live there for a few years. But Tony, I think you said there's information at the town's website.
Yeah, there are certain requirements to qualify for the senior tax freeze, and the information should be available at your township municipal building.
Okay, Mr. Schwenke, this one is for you. What's the timeline for all this work to be done, and will schools have to close?
Great question. As mentioned earlier, we have 5 years from the approval of sale of bonds to complete all this work. That means shovels in the ground, buildings completed and open for use. And to the second part of that question is no. These facilities will not be closed to do this work. Obviously, when spaces are being renovated, if they're done in the summer, it doesn't impact curriculum. If they're done during the school year, we would only be able to do that if the district was able to what we call swing space or relocate students temporarily. I just want to be clear that there's many factors that play into this, and that's why the 5 years are so essential. For instance, the ability to contract enough manpower and enough material to do all these projects is something that my team has been considering this entire time. We have to literally spread out these projects to ensure that there's adequate contracting power and adequate materials in the supply chain to ensure we can meet the demand to complete your projects. So there will be immediate movement, but the conclusion of all projects will not occur until likely the 5th year.
Thanks so much for that clarity. Don't turn off your microphone because we have one other question for you. What are the district's plans to contract with minority or women-owned businesses for the work proposed?
It's a great question. And this varies by state and location. New Jersey doesn't have specific contracting requirements established for public big construction projects at this time for minority or women-owned business. However, there is a move to push for the importance of this. And for instance, the New Jersey Schools Development Authority has started entering these requirements into their contracts. Interestingly enough, it actually creates some challenges. The minority aspect of it is not so difficult. but in many instances, the women-owned business aspect is tough when it comes to the contracting side. I cannot say that we would have any bare or any minimum requirement. Obviously, it's advantageous to have diversity and inclusion in this process. However, we're not bound to any regulation or statutory limits at this time.
Thank you. This next question I'm going to take. Would these improvements create additional space in the schools for intervention, tutoring, or SEL opportunities and enrichment programs? The answer is yes, in two ways. Question one is going to offer additional classroom space because it's going to free up some additional classrooms that are now used for gym. So the gym annex will open up a classroom space. It will help us not have that shared space during intervention. Students will be able to work in a space that's more conducive for learning, especially for striving scholars. The additional library spaces also offer another space that classes can go into for SEL opportunities, assemblies, enrichment activities, tutoring, and other intervention. And then question two helps because that revenue, again, helps free up other space so that we can continue to prioritize our instruction for our intervention students, but for all students. So yes, definitely, it would create additional opportunities to support academics and prioritize that as we move forward. We have several questions about the proposed indoor track and basketball complex. We're going to group them together and try and get through as much of them as possible tonight. How much revenue could the track bring in, and when would the district expect to start receiving revenue? Is question number one.
I guess I will jump in when it comes to the revenue. The potential revenue, one of the case studies that we looked at with Tom's River and Ocean Breeze, as well as the Armory, the revenue is pretty much limitless to our capabilities. We're able to open this up to non-track related events. We're able to have track related events. We're able to have basketball, volleyball, and other events hosted at this location. So it's really just making sure that the management of the facilities is done appropriately and gets the information out there. What was the second question, Ms. Hill Parker?
Sure. When would the district expect to start receiving revenue?
Okay, thank you. So first, the facility has to be built. I think the facility would be slated in phase two. Um, so after that, during that time frame, the district would start reaching out to the appropriate entities to start booking events and booking track meets once it opens. So
Dr. Lewis, I'm sorry. Can we get revenue from the naming rights as once the structure on the outside is finished before people start to use it?
Absolutely, absolutely. That
So,
is definitely an available revenue source as well. So if let's say a Nike wants to put their name as the Nike facility, and they want to provide the district yearly revenue source, that's available once we start building.
And Dr. Lewis, just to piggyback off of that, so everyone understands, you're correct. Obviously, we have to build it before we can use it. If we were given the okay to go forward right now today, you'd probably see this facility in approximately 2 years. What it would take for my team to prepare the design and documentation, to publicly bid it, engage a contracting arm, and then probably a 16-month to 18-month build.
Okay, Mr. Swanky, will the parking lot near Country Club be expanded for that complex? Can you tell us what the plans are for that?
Yes, the parking lot will be significantly expanded to meet the demand of the facility. I hate to quote numbers, but I believe we have around 500 parking spaces for personal vehicles at the facility, as well as bus parking for the larger buses that arrive, bringing patrons and students to the facility for utilization. The way this would work is everyone, if you know Country Club Lane, you pull off the main roadway and you head into the District Board of Ed offices. Before you'd arrive at the board office parking lot, there would be a roadway that would be created off of that drive, and it would go back behind the existing administration building, and that would provide you to access to this complex and parking lot.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We have a few more here. Would the indoor track have a floor cover to allow for non-sports events?
Yes, it would. It would definitely allow for sports events. You're able to have meetings. You're able to do different activities there as well. So yes.
What studies were done regarding the increased traffic related to that complex?
With the preparation of this design, we looked at access to the facility and the site and the impact it would have on adjacent residential properties. To be honest, this wasn't the first site chosen and designed. It was actually, we designed the site and realized that the impact on the local residential community at this one location was not conducive to supporting this project. So we have looked at the main thoroughfare access between 130 295, and we've looked at a district property which we believe provides the least impact on the adjacent residential. The traffic study to show the roadway and what would possibly result in a change in timing of traffic lights has not been completed. That will be something that will be done if the project's approved.
Okay, moving on along here, how many spectators can this complex accommodate?
I believe the intent is to accommodate up to 1,000. That is our plan that we've preliminarily based this on, and the parking accordingly.
When the bond is paid back, will our taxes go back down? And with the added revenue from the indoor track / basketball complex, will our taxes go down?
Excuse me, yes, when the bond is paid off, the taxes for that bond will go down. In addition, the district has some debt outstanding now that will be paid off, excuse me, in 2030. I'm sorry, I just need to check this. 2036. So there will be a portion of the debt that goes away in 2036, their existing debt. So that will go away. And again, after 22 years, this bond will go away and the taxes will be decreased. What was the second part of the question? I'm sorry.
Sure. With the added revenue from the indoor track complex, will the taxes go down as a result of that?
Yeah, it can flow through the budget. If there's revenue coming in, it can go into the budget as revenue. And then in the subsequent year, it can go to pay the debt service on the bonds. It would decrease the tax levy. Taxes for debt service is a separate tax levy for towns. That's the way it's structured in New Jersey. So there's operating budget tax levy and debt service tax levy. So that's why we say it has to go through the operating budget, and then the district would appropriate that for the debt service in the subsequent year.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So we plan to end at 8:30 tonight, but we have just a few more questions. So we'd like to stay on a little late and answer them. Dr. Lewis, this is a two-part question for you. Is the school board planning to raise taxes for the 25-26 school budget? Would this increase be in addition to the referendum?
So I cannot speak fully for the Board of Ed. It would be the recommendation not to raise tax if the bond referendum did go through. It would be the recommendation not to raise taxes on top of the referendum. This is what was discussed previously, but I cannot speak for the board.
Thanks so much.
If I could mention again that Selling the bonds in July of 2025 means that the tax impact for the bonds doesn't go into effect until July of 2026. So the budget that the district's going to work on now, even though we're going to sell the bonds in July, there's not going to be a tax impact until the following July 2026. So something to keep in mind.
So we've mentioned the tax rebate program called the Senior Freeze, but we've received several more questions about this topic. The referendum website has information about those programs with website links and a phone number to get even more information. Anyone who needs that can find it at willingboro.org/reimagine. We've answered so many questions tonight, and we appreciate all the Willingboro residents who joined us. Again, this will be recorded, so make sure that any friends who missed it know they'll be able to see it on our website. In addition to this virtual town hall, you can attend one of our in-person town halls. The presentation will be very similar. At some of the schools, you may get the opportunity to see some of the areas that could be improved through this referendum. You can also learn a lot from our website. You can send a question to the email address of reimagine@wboe.net. That site again, reimagine@wboe.net. We've shared a lot of information and answered a lot of questions. We hope this helps people understand what they're voting on. All details about voting are at willingboroschools.org/reimagine. Forms, deadlines, directions, poll times, and locations. There are 3 more in-person town halls planned, and all of them will start at 6:30 p.m. in different locations. At some of the schools, people will be given the opportunity to see some of the areas that could be improved. You can also send questions to reimagine@wboe.net. If you prefer to speak to someone in person, call the district's business administrator here on this call, Dr. Stephen Lewis, at 609-835-8600, 609-835-8600. To all of our professional advisors and our staff members, thank you for your time and expertise tonight. Thank you to everyone who watched from home or somewhere else. And finally, on behalf of Dr. Outlaw, the board, and everyone represented here, thank you to everyone who learned how this referendum is designed to reimagine Willingboro Public Schools. Good night, and remember to vote by mail in the next few weeks or in person on Tuesday, March 11th. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night, thank you.